Welcome to PNNL. I'm in the Environmental Molecular Sciences Laboratory, and in the specific lab that I'm in, we're studying fundamental processes of energy storage materials, such as catalysts and batteries. These are materials that can help decarbonize the US energy infrastructure. For batteries, we're trying to understand how to make them higher energy density so that you can take your electric car even further on a single charge. My colleague Sam Johnson will talk about catalysts, but to make sure that we're on the same page, I'd like you to think about the catalytic converter in an internal combustion engine. The catalysts in those catalytic converters help to reduce emissions that cause smog, and PNNL has played a critical role in developing those catalysts. Specifically, the catalysts in the Dodge Cummin diesels running down the road today were developed at PNNL. And what I love about that story is it started with the fundamental understanding of those catalysts, understanding that we can obtain in a lab such as the one that I'm in. The instrument behind me is unique in North America, and it's going to allow us to study energy storage materials at a much more detailed level. The problem with energy storage materials is that the features that can direct how they function and also how they fail are often very rare within the material. The result is that it can take years to even decades with a standard piece of equipment to be able to see them. The instrument behind me has the potential to reduce that time to days to even hours so that we can see things that we literally could not see before. We're interested in understanding several different properties of these materials. One is how the atom by atom structure is oriented relative to each other. So how are the atoms placed relevant to each other, and how does that control how the material works? We're also trying to understand interfaces. The interface between a solid and a liquid or a solid and a gas behave very differently than a bulk solution or a bulk material, and understanding how those differences dictate performance becomes critical in making the materials more and more efficient. One of the things PNNL is known for is to understand and study these materials under actual operating conditions, such as high pressure and high temperature. The equipment to study these often isn't sold commercially, and so we have to build them ourselves. I have here an example of a piece of equipment that we've built ourselves. This is called a probe, and it goes inside of the piece of equipment behind me. We're able to use high temperature and high pressure to study things like catalysts and batteries so that we're able to look at them under actual operating conditions, so we have a better idea of how they're going to function when they're deployed into technology. Sometimes we're just not able to do an experiment. It might take too long, or the technical capabilities that we have just don't exist yet. And so we complement our studies with computational studies to help fill in some of the gaps from our experimental studies.
The instruments you see behind me are frequently used by my collaborators to characterize and understand molecules and materials. These capabilities and the collaborations that have come with them are a big part of why I joined PNNL as a postdoctoral researcher. I'm a computational chemist, so my primary tool is a computer. However, these types of instruments frequently inform our models. I work on net zero carbon energy sources, energy storage, and the molecules that make these transformations possible. These molecules, called catalysts and batteries, are a big part of our energy landscape. I study the fundamentals of these catalysts. How do their atoms move, and how are bonds made and broken? The idea is that if we can understand these fundamentals, we can make better catalysts. Catalysts that are safer, faster, and more energy efficient. I don't do this work alone, however. I work as a big team of scientists ranging from high school students to graduate students to other postdoctoral researchers to staff scientists like myself and beyond. We also work frequently with universities. Catalysts are a huge part of reaching the goal of decarbonizing energy. And so they have lots of applications within that space, including improving vehicle emissions, converting plastics into useful materials, helping us mitigate the plastic waste problem. We also use catalysts in order to make the fuels of the future. For example, PNNL and LanzaJet have partnered to make aviation fuels from industrial waste gases, effectively turning trash into useful materials. A flight was even completed using these types of fuels. I use catalysis in studying how we can store solar energy in fuels. We can think about storing this energy over time. Perhaps you store in the summer and then harvest in the winter. Or we can think about storing geographically. Maybe we store sunlight in a really sunny place like Richland, Washington, and then transport it to a less sunny place where people can use it. Biological catalysts, called enzymes, are often better than man-made catalysts at doing these transformations at reasonable temperatures and pressures. Therefore, we spend a lot of time studying these enzymes in order to understand how they work, so that one, we can apply these lessons in making better man-made catalysts, but two, so that we can also incorporate these enzymes into our energy landscape. One place where enzymes are better than man-made catalysts in terms of achieving low temperature reactions is in the field of making fertilizers. Making fertilizers may seem more like a problem for the Department of Agriculture. However, it's a huge energy problem. It turns out that the process of making fertilizers consumes 1 to 4% of the globe's energy each year. That's a huge amount of energy. And if we can reclaim some of that, that would mean a lot of energy saved. Enzymes are able to do this transformation at low temperatures and low pressures. So we try to study how these enzymes operate so that we can learn from them. If we want to study them computationally, however, this can be really complicated. Enzymes are really big, they have a lot of moving parts, as well as having metal centers that can be difficult to simulate for traditional computational methods. Therefore, PNNL is invested in the energy technologies of the future, one of which is quantum computing. Quantum computing may help us simulate the centers of these enzymes better than traditional methods. Then we'll combine what we learn from quantum computing with traditional computing and experiment in order to better understand and then apply lessons from enzymes to man-made catalysts.
Thank you for joining us on the tour today. I hope you enjoyed learning more about how we're working to understand the fundamental properties of energy storage materials.